Hi everyone! My name is Kristin and today we are going to find out about everything that you can see on an opera stage. There are different categories of things you can see. Can you remember anything from the previous videos? How about the costumes that the singers were wearing? And were they holding anything? Daggers, lanterns, vegetables? And what about the things in the background that tell you where the scene is taking place? All these elements together are called the set. The stage is set means when the curtain opens, everything is on the stage ready for the show to begin. The set is really important because it can tell you things about the opera even before anyone starts to sing. It can tell you where and when the story is happening, and it gives you a clue about the general mood. For example, is it going to be a funny story or a dark and gloomy one? There can be traditional sets where the director tries to recreate a certain time in history, like ancient Egypt or the Romans. Or there can be sets where the director creates a world of complete fantasy. This might look modern, futuristic even, or ancient, like long before our time. There are also sets which are really strange and quirky and you can't put them in a particular time or place. Let's take a look at some pictures of different scenes and see what we can tell about the opera just from what we see in the set. This scene is the outside of a traditional Chinese building, which could be a temple. The angles of the roof are a bit strange, aren't they? Making it look unusual. And look at this blood red color of the building. I wouldn't expect a gentle story there. This set was designed by a very famous British painter, David Hockney. Let's have a look at the next slide. So here we've got those two flags representing the US and China. And there are two people in suits playing a board game. The blue neon lights could be chessboard squares. And the totally black background suggests it is quite a serious scene. It looks modern, doesn't it? It could be showing a power battle between two world leaders. On to the next slide. What's that in the background? Gingerbread. And could that be the window of a gingerbread house? Can you think of a story that features lots of gingerbread? You guessed it. It's the opera Hansel and Gretel. Next slide. Talking about food in the opera, look at this. The backdrop is a gigantic fridge. See the singers squeezed in next to the sausages? And this is where the vegetables come in. On to the final slide. This one is quite different to the others. It's much more simple, isn't it? There isn't nearly as much going on. But even so, it is really effective and you get a sense of how powerful the person on the stairs must be. In most opera houses, the scenes can be changed really quickly. Things can be let down from the ceiling or come in from the sides. Trees are being wheeled in and houses are being wheeled out and stuff like that. There's loads of space above the stage. Opera houses are really high above the stage to store all the technical stuff, spotlights and such. But there are some stages where the set can't be changed at all during the performance. And the stage designers can really go to huge lengths to make this one set very impressive. In Austria, there is an open-air theatre where the stage is floating on a lake.
Wow!
The set changes every year, and here are some examples of the sets from previous years. Look at this. And this. And this. And this. And this. And this. In fact, this floating opera impressed the makers of the James Bond movies so much that they asked whether they could film a scene from Quantum of Solace in it. Did you know that before people actually begin building these big sets, their first job is to create really tiny models of the stage, so they can see how everything fits together and make sure everything will work? Here's a little clip for you.
The drawing office is a very integral part of the company because they will draw up the plans for the construction workshop and then they deliver a final model with all the finishes and all the props included.
And the model is the reference that the director and designer will always use to visualise what they want in each scene, so they can move the people about, they can put figures in, they're very tactile with the models.
So, what about the costumes? They can tell us so much about an opera, or rather, about the characters. Let's think about some of the characters that we've met already. Do any of you remember this one? Do you think he is a nice person or not? Probably not. What about this character? Doesn't her headdress make you think that she might be royalty? Well, she is. She is Dido, Queen of Carthage. What about these two? Well, they are dressed as mermaids, and most people like mermaids, so we might think they are really rather nice. But why do they have this big black hair and scary pale makeup? Maybe they are scary witches after all? The costumes can also tell us about the kind of story the opera is about. Looking at the military uniforms here, we can tell that this one is probably about a historical war. And this one, a bit more light-hearted, don't you think? Just like with the models for the set, the costumes are drawn on paper before they are made to see if they fit with the rest of the set and the mood of the opera. And it is worth noting that these are two different full-time jobs. The set designer is responsible for the stage design, and the costume designer is responsible for the costume design. And finally, the properties, or short, the props. Props are objects that are used on stage as part of the opera. Sometimes they are just in the background, and sometimes they are really important to the storyline. Who designs them? The prop designer. The props can be as simple as a rose, and other times they can be larger than life. One example where the prop is really important is in Giancarlo Menotti's opera, The Telephone. Guess what the prop is? The story is about a man trying to propose to his girlfriend, but she just won't get off the phone. Let's see how he solves the problem in the end.
But now, please, will you listen to me?
Of course, what else have I done? Go on then.
Well, as we were saying, you know how much I've always cared for you. So, I was just wondering, that is of course after I come back, if you would consider... Oh, go insane!
Hello, hello! Why, George, it's you! Hello.
Hello.
Where are you, my darling?
I'm terribly near you, right next to your ear.
Did you miss your train?
Not yet.
But why did you leave me? And what was the thing you so wanted to tell me?
Will you marry me?
Oh, Ben, oh,
Blessed invention, extend your forgiveness.
Now, sometimes it's confusing whether a prop is a prop or is actually part of the stage design. Maybe you can guess what the elephant in the room is? In our series of videos, we have been focusing on the music of Henry Purcell, and in particular on his opera Dido and Aeneas from more than 300 years ago. Although in Purcell's time, opera couldn't use the technology that we have today, the main aim was still to dazzle and wow the audience. 17th century opera theatres were the first to use machinery to change the sets and make optical illusions for the audience to marvel at. For the first time in history, the audience could be transported from one place to another without leaving their seats.
Nice.
We have become used to that since the invention of film, but for these early audiences, the experience was completely new. These were the so-called mechanical operas, and some still survive from the 18th century. Here are some clips from the theatre in the Swedish palace. And here are some clips from a theatre in a palace in Moscow. Did you notice that the stage was a different shape to what we are used to seeing? These days, we are used to stages being wide and shallow, like this. But in the mechanical operas, the stage was narrow and deep, to allow for space for all the machinery. They also had the stage on a slight dip towards the audience, to make it easier for everyone to see the singers. And they designed the stages using perspective, which is where all the lines go to one point of the stage to give it a 3D effect of being much longer than it actually is. Let's take a look at some of this machinery in more detail. Here is how they used to create the effect of waves.
In between the painted cut-out waves, there's a modelled corkscrew. As that turns, you get the impression of waves receding in the background. And in the correct dimness of light, they can look remarkably realistic.
When they wanted thunder, they used to roll heavy boulders through tubes or under the ground, like this. And here comes the wind machine. To finish off, let's take a look at a scene change from an opera played at the Castle Theatre in the Czech Republic. Now we are going to hear about what it's like to create a stage from the opera director and producer Frederic Wake Walker.
Hi everybody, my name's Freddie and I am an opera director. What is an opera director? Well, it's not the conductor. The conductor waves their arms around and keeps the music all together. It's not the designer. The designer draws up all the plans and pictures for the set and the costumes and the props and the lights. It's not the stage manager. The stage manager is in control of the stage, as it were, during the performance. They make sure that everyone is where they need to be and that they've got everything that they need. In fact, the director doesn't need to be there for the performance. I've got nothing to do, because everything that the director does happens before the performance happens. And the very first thing that the director needs to do is come up with the big idea for the production. And then I work with the conductor, with the designers, with the stage managers, and with all the singers and actors and all of the crew backstage, and we take that big idea and we make it a reality on the stage. So when I'm trying to come up with the big idea for a production, the first thing I go to is always the music. I really listen to the music, really try and feel it, because the music tells us so much about how the characters are feeling, what the overall atmosphere of the piece is, and it's also how the story is transmitted to the audience. If I wasn't an opera director, but I was still going to be working in opera, then I think I would want to be a flyman. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but on big stages, above the stage, there's something called the fly tower. And in the fly tower are loads and loads of bars and loads of ropes. And when you want a piece of scenery to disappear magically, then the flyman pulls a rope and a piece of scenery disappears up into the fly tower. Also, when the curtain opens, when the curtain closes, it's the flyman who's also controlling that. So the flyman really has the magic of theatre in their fingertips. My very first memory of opera was when I was about your age, and I was in an opera and I was playing a train. Well, I was playing the part of a train. There were a group of us and we were all in a line and we were all going chuffa chuffa chuff chuff chuffa chuffa chuff chuffa chuffa chuff chuff chuffa chuffa chuff, like that. And I still remember it, so it must have been a pretty amazing experience. I think what I love most about opera is the fact that it brings so many different people together, and everybody brings their own skill and their own personality, and yet we all come together and we make this one thing all together.
Thank you, Frederic, for all that fascinating information. And thank you all so much for watching today. I hope you enjoyed learning about all the things you can see in an opera, and maybe one or two of you will be interested to become a set designer. Don't forget to tune in next week when you will meet Jessica, who will be teaching you about dance, movement and meaning in an opera. Bye for now!